exciting. So first, I just want to thank you so much for doing this interview with the JLA. We really appreciate it. And before we kind of get into your article, would you be able to kind of give us a brief description of who you are and the research that you're interested in doing?
Yes, so thank you so much for having me. My name is Kate Arnold-Murray, and I am a doctoral candidate at the University of Colorado Boulder in the Department of Linguistics. I consider myself a linguistic anthropologist, and the work that I do primarily focuses on how different kinds of political actors, whether that be individuals, grassroots actors, political campaigns, construct political identities and political arguments using language, both verbal language and also different kinds of visual language. I'm especially interested in how this takes place online, and so a lot of my analysis in my work is multimodal and digital discourse analysis, and looking especially at how young people are trying to motivate young voters in particular. But for the piece we'll talk about today, I'm more particularly looking at language use on the left and how conflict forms out of different interpretations of the same sign.
Yeah, it was a really interesting read, by the way, not to jump ahead, but no, I appreciate like kind of the large variety of work that you're interested in doing and kind of the importance of it, and looking at multimodal forms as we'll probably get into with your article. I think it allows for a lot more like sort of interesting conversation to happen. So, all that being said, would you be able to kind of provide a summary of the article that you had submitted to the JLA for a public audience?
Sure. In 2019, I was living in Washington, D.C., and I was a member of the Washington, D.C. queer community as well as Jewish community. And I was actually out of town during the 2019 DC Dyke March, but saw lots of arguing going on Facebook. And I wanted to dig into what was going on among like-minded people to create so much conflict online. So in 2019, the DC Dyke March banned the Jewish LGBTQ plus pride flag, which is a rainbow pride flag with a white Star of David superimposed on its center, from the march, claiming that the flag was reminiscent of the flag of Israel and thus a symbol of violent nationalism. However, the DC Dyke March received a lot of backlash and media attention, claiming that the ban was anti-Semitic and that it was actually a ban of a Jewish symbol. And so this article takes an approach to looking at both sides of the meaning making behind this conflict, not arguing that one side or another is right, but rather that there are differential processes of indexical connections going on to create this conflict. So, on one hand, we have people arguing that this sign looks like the Israeli flag and that thus it's a symbol of nationalism. And on the other hand, we have a side arguing that the Star of David is purely a Jewish symbol that originated before the Zionist movement. And so it's a Jewish symbol, and banning it is actually an anti-Jewish move. And so I look in particular at how different people on Facebook are talking about manipulating national flags and queer pride flags to make their arguments about what the sign should mean and what other people should take up as a moral stance about the ban of the pride flag. And importantly, I look at the pride flag, the Jewish pride flag, as a bricolage construction, which is when there is an overall construction that's made up of different meaningful components. So we could think of an example of a piece of art being made out of buttons. That would be a bricolage construction. In the same way, we have that meaningful component of the rainbow pride flag, and then we have the meaningful component of the Star of David. So I'm looking at when we have contestations of one component, the Star of David, construction can be embroiled in political conflict. And so I look at how that's happening.
Yeah, it was a really impactful read, the things that you're analyzing, but then also the inclusion of, the different flags and the different ways in which people were responding to kind of the ban of the flag in the first place. I mean, you kind of see it, on both sides. You see kind of the same argument, but for different reasons. And I think that including the explanation of the bricolage kind of ties it all together. And you're kind of like, oh, okay, it's interesting how one thing can index, multiple meanings.
Yeah, for sure. And depending on what one's lived experience with the Star of David or the Israeli flag or the Jewish pride flag is, they're going to have different interpretations of what it means. So people who are exposed to the growing media exposure about what's going on in Israel and Palestine might be more likely to read a horizontal striped flag with a Star of David in the center as indexing Zionism or the modern state of Israel, whereas people who grew up wearing the Star of David as a necklace around their neck to signify Judaism or going to temple might be more likely to interpret that as a sign of Judaism and not Israel. Importantly, there was a group that seemed to have overlap in that they seemed to interchange whether it signified Judaism or Israel, but that group in both cases thought that the ban of the flag was still anti-Semitic. So that was an interesting one where we have this one group of commenters saying, no, it's Jewish, thus it's anti-Semitic, and then another group of commenters saying, well, it's Jewish and it's Israeli, and thus it's anti-Semitic. And I think that's a slightly different argument than the others. But looking at this through how people are sharing emojis, how people are sharing memes, things like that. So it's not just how people are verbally talking about it, but also using the symbols themselves to display their moral stances about it.
Yeah, no, it makes for a really interesting discussion. And I think more than anything too, kind of how you contextualize it in the situation, this current political situation. I mean, that probably explodes the amount of sort of conflict that there might be presently compared to what happened in like kind of what you're seeing happen and what you're explaining that happened in the 2019 ban. I can only imagine that now like tenfold, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I've noticed that that's a point of interest among like readers or when I present this work is what's going on now. This was 2019. The Chicago Dyke March had banned the construction in 2017. And a lot of Jewish communities and Jewish individuals now are moving toward other markers of LGBTQ pride that indexes Judaism as well, whether that's having a high on a flag instead or having other symbols or moving the Star of David out of the center onto a corner, things like that to differentiate a little more iconically between the flag of the State of Israel and the Jewish pride flag. I end the article by talking about an Instagram story that a friend of mine who's Jewish American posted saying that she won't wear the Star of David around her neck anymore because she feels it's been co-opted by the State of Israel. Obviously, that's a really personal decision, and I'm not making a judgment on that one way or another, but those meaning-making processes are going on where we're seeing this meaning-making process go on where over time, mediatizations of Israel and the association with that sign rather than associations with Judaism are taking hold in public consciousness. And so even individuals who have long identified with the symbol for a long time are now moving away from it in some capacities, not all, but some, depending on what their political orientations are.
Absolutely. Well, readers, if you're interested in seeing more about this, I encourage all of you to check out Kate's wonderful article to the JLA. And thank you so much for your time, Kate. Before we end the official interview, would you be able to give us any sort of like contact information? Should any readers be really interested in learning more about this or other of your works? Do you have any sort of email, social media people can reach out to you on?
Sure. So my Twitter handle is K_Arnold_Murray. And my very long university email address is Katherine with a K dot Arnold hyphen Murray at colorado.edu. And I welcome you to email me and look forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'll make sure to include that email and everything on the video and I'll put it in the bio. So feel free to reach out to Kate. And I just thank you again so much for your time and the wonderful discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.